Have you ever had one of these?
Oh, I haven't.
Good.
Sorry. That's all right. Well, good morning. Good morning, all who are joining us. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And for those of you who are watching after the fact, so glad you could be here too. I'm Dr. Margo Jacquot, owner and director of the Juniper Center, and welcome to our first Friday of the month Facebook Thrive Live broadcast. So today we're talking to a really interesting guest, although I have to say, I think all my guests are interesting. And good morning to the folks who are joining us. John, nice to see you here. Thanks for being here with us. Today we have a great guest, Brian Fretwell. He's a speaker, a master facilitator. He's an author of the book, Experts of Our Potential, and the founder of People Strength. He's done a really excellent TED Talk that we will tell you about in a little while. But good morning, Brian. Thank you so much for being here. We're thrilled to have you. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, nice to see you. Great. It's a nice Friday. I don't know how the weather is over where you're at, but
it's beautiful. It's a little on the chilly side. It's in the 40s, but at least the sun is out, thank goodness, which in Chicago is always welcome. And how is it in Idaho today?
Believe it or not, it was almost 90 degrees yesterday, but today is going to be a little more manageable, I believe, in the 70s. So you never know with late spring, it can be raining in 50 or really nice. So I think today's going to be a nice day. So looking forward to it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, great. Well, I'm glad you can join us, whatever the weather is. And for anyone watching, wherever you are, glad you can be here too. And if you are there, please say hi, put a little comment in the comments, let us know you're here. If you have any questions, please let us know as well. So, Brian, I want to just start by asking, so what went well in this week because of you?
Fair. This is a question we get to entertain every day in the company. For me, this week, what went well has been just sort of consistent learning. Yeah, we've had some really good insights of what the folks want with what we're doing, and just reinforce for what our team is bringing. How about you? What has went well for in your week?
Oh goodness. So well, I got a little older this week. That went well. I'm glad about that. So one of the things that went well this week is, my kids are winding down school, and there's a huge transition at this point in time, I think, particularly because of COVID, and just feeling like I've been able to carve out time to really show up for my kids despite a busy schedule, and just seeing what an impact that has, how important that connection is, to be available, to be curious about what they're thinking and feeling, and definitely that seems to be sort of consistent with your mission in your life, is that kind of presence for people, and how important that is. So I think that was one of the things that went well, and something that we really try to do it at our practice as well.
Yeah, that's a great, and there's always a follow-up response, because there's the what went well, and then there's diving into the locus of control. So with that, what did you do to allow that to happen? Like what maybe differently, maybe a little bit more, but what was your input on that?
Oh, I love that question. I would have to say, and I love your TED Talk in part for this reason. There's a term that you use that I have written down here, Jacquot, which I love, and I would love to hear more about that. But it really, my position with them is much more about staying curious. Not, even though I'm in the leadership position, and you talk to leaders all the time, you are doing fascinating leadership work with people of all ages throughout the world. So, to think about what's one thing that I can do with my kids or with anybody I come into contact with, it's asking questions and being curious, and not always feeling like I am the leader and the leadership is about me, to your point, but it's about the we. And so really trying to be in that space with them and find out more about what they're thinking and feeling. And I think particularly with kids and teenagers, people are telling them a whole lot, right? Coaches, teachers, parents, everybody. But I think the secret sauce in our house is a lot of curiosity. And I think having two therapist parents probably helps. Now, they'll be in therapy themselves because of having two therapist parents, no doubt. But
yeah, fair. Yeah, completely understand that. I'm married to a therapist myself, so we get it. We just have the two puppies though, so they get their own. We just running behavioral experiments on them all the time.
I love that. I love that.
But as you talk about, like, we have this idea of leadership or just leading in general as telling, as I'm the person that has the answers and I set the direction. But what I find interesting is when you start using questions more, and what I tell people is just from a brain science perspective, the person asking the questions is the one leading the conversation. It doesn't matter if they're the leader or they're someone else, because your brain can't not answer a question, right? The term is instinctive elaboration, right? And so we don't understand a whole lot about it, quite frankly, but we do know that there's basically the energy is being expanded. Maybe that's the most simplest way I can say it, but our brain has to come up with an answer. It doesn't have to come up with the right answer, right? But it kind of pulls us out and puts us back in, and that's why really good questions are about managing the energy in the other person as much as they are about setting direction and driving in a way. And when you do a good job of asking questions that generate curiosity, so a question that then, the answer actually makes you more curious, then you're actually creating internal motivation. And they call those epistemic, they call that epistemic curiosity, right? Epistemic questions are questions that drive internal motivation because you're more curious after answering them. So yeah, it sounds like all that stuff is going on at your house. And now you know the words.
Yeah, we're trying, and thank goodness it seems to be working so far. So do you have some favorite questions? And of course, it's going to depend. I mean, that would be more prescriptive, and that doesn't appear to be your style, but.
Yeah, it's funny. That question has come up a lot this week, actually. Like I get asked all the time, do you have a list of questions? And I really struggle with that. And because formulating a question for the person asking the question is 50% of the benefit. Because in formulating, I now have to start, now I'm activating probably empathy. I have to be creating a really good question requires me putting myself in the other person's shoes, requires me thinking a couple of questions ahead of what is this going to generate and do? And so for me, it's less of a, here's my favorite question and more, here's my favorite structure.
For how to ask it.
Yeah. So we have a diagram that we use on the call sometimes, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's in intensity and connection. The higher the number, the higher the intensity and connection, and it's about locus of control. Is it in or out of my control, right? And then is it positive or negative? And so the one that actually, number 1 is out of my control and negative. That requires very little energy, easy to talk about. Oh, the weather sucks today, right? And
right.
But it doesn't require, we're not thinking a whole lot. Then number 2, positive, but still out of my control. And interestingly, number 3 is negative, inside of my control. It is easier to talk about, I screwed this up, than it is to talk about, I did this that made this thing better. And so if I think about that 4th category, then the question, does the question help the person focus on what they did, what they brought, and what it affected? Yeah, in a positive way.
In a positive way. So Brian, help us understand that a little better. I couldn't agree with you more. And of course, as a therapist, I'm talking all the time with people about what they think didn't go well in their lives, that things that they're out of control of. And also the things that they've done. People are really quick and very willing to tell me about how they screwed things up. And when we try to flip that a bit and talk about mindset, because mindset is huge for you, and there is a whole neuroscience, and you've already been doing graphs. I mean, clearly you have studied this, you understand this at a very deep level from a cognitive perspective, but also you get the emotion behind it as well. So help us understand that a little bit more about from a neuroscience and just from a personal perspective, what happens that it's so hard for people to talk about the good that they've done?
I think there's some cultural answers, but I actually think that in a very basic way, we are designed, we are monitoring 7 times a second. I think our eyes are looking 7 times a second for safety. And for humans, social safety is, I always joke that your brain's designed to run away from bears, but very few of us, even me in Idaho, are running away from bears in the morning. So the bear is, am I accepted? Am I going to be made fun of? Am I going to be rejected? Because your brain doesn't distinguish physical pain and social pain very much at all. That's Susan Eisenberg's work out of Stanford back in 2011, and Michael Lieberman helping with that right now. But with that, then I think about risk. And if I say out loud, here's what I did and here's how it's making it better, I am now at risk. And every one of us has the experience of stepping into that confidence, stepping into, hey, I think I do this well, or I want to be this. Like, think about formative experiences when you're a kid. I'm going to be, and I think about myself, I was in acting and I did it competitively. And then I was also in football, and there were multiple experiences of, I'm this, well, you know what I mean?
You're not
enough rejection. And that rejection has a lot of, as you know, energy, right? High enough energy, that's trauma, right? And so our brain absolutely remembers that, and it writes the story. And so being able to find a place to rewrite the story, to say, this is what I'm good at, so that again, I'm changing the mechanism in there, right? Meaning I'm changing the mindset, because the more clear I am and the more confident I am about the story, the stronger the mindset is in there. And so what we look to do, and where I learned it, is my whole career has been working in industries that I have no idea about. Right. Going to a diamond mine, I don't know anything about mining diamonds, going into tech companies, like they start talking in acronyms and I gloss over.
Yeah.
So when we're in those situations, when it's not about, I have all the information and I know, then you realize the power isn't in changing somebody's mind, it's in building their mindset. And we build mindset by helping clarify the story, by helping them see their part in the story, and then helping them rather project that in the future. And that requires questions. There's no other way to do that than asking questions, because I have to be both the student and the teacher in that situation.
Which you're willing to do, thank goodness. And anyone who can watch your TED Talk, it's phenomenal. It's what a 15-year-old meth addict taught me. Wonderful, wonderful TED Talk. So
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Make sure people have access to that. And, you're a great student as much as you're a great teacher, right? So you have learned through the people who are involved. You talk in the TED Talk about Sal, who was sort of coaching you about how to connect with Nathan, who was the 15-year-old meth addict, and to get to that information and help him get to that place where he could emotionally connect to what he really wanted to do in his life. And it didn't have anything to do with you telling him information. It had to do with you being curious.
And honestly, I wasted a lot of time in the telling, and I still do. I mean, it's human. We want to help. Like, it's ingrained in our DNA to help. And there's multiple studies as that it feels better to give than to receive. The only thing is that when we're giving an answer, we're giving advice, we're actually taking stuff away, because that's about like this, I gave that, but I don't actually get the response. And when you start asking questions, you realize that the response is so much bigger. What you're getting, right? What you're receiving as an individual when the question helps somebody have an insight. Because you can't have an insight for somebody. That's something they have to do on their own, connection of the non-conscious parts of the brain. And when that happens, when you experience it, you realize you can tell somebody 15 times the right answer, and it doesn't hold a candle to when they figure out the answer on their own, on an answer specific to them that neither of you may have thought about before. And that's where the real power is, because when you have that an insight, or when you have that connection, when you own the story yourself, when that individual says, here's what I am and here's what I'm going to do, the chances for behavioral change, are just quantified, substantially. Yeah.
Substantially, yeah, and exponentially.
Yeah.
So this is really part of what you do at your company, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, we call it a gym, right? And it happened. We started this project. Now I've been doing this gym kind of thing with a group of friends for close to 10 years now. We have a 1 hour call every week where we can only talk about what went well the prior week. And a year ago, when the pandemic started and I was traveling and that all went dark overnight, I just started a Zoom call and invited other people. And what we have discovered and what we continue to discover is it started with what went well. And then we created what we call the FIRES acronym over about 6 months, because we were looking at where are the most impactful stories, questions, mindsets. And so we came up with, so FIRE stands for feelings, influence, resilience, ethics, strength. So self-awareness, internal locus of control, growth mindset, values and purpose, and strengths and ability. And so what we have is a call where you you go into breakout rooms and you have 10 minutes where you're on kind of, if we will, a clarification seat where two people are just asking you questions. And when you're the person asking questions, you cannot give advice, you cannot give feedback, you can only ask questions. And the really neat thing is that what's happening on both sides, this person gets a chance to tell their story and the important of the FIRE parts of the story. So we're purposefully asking a question that ignites the other person, right? In any of those categories, because we know those categories have a big impact on performance. But the other part of that is, while we intellectually know asking good questions is the right thing to do, unless you consistently give your brain that experience, you will always revert back to telling. And I do these every week, and I catch myself in the telling. But what we're doing is we're employing social learning to build that habit. Not just asking questions, but also the social learning of, I can tell my story and not get that judgment, not get that pushback. And what we know is that we're building those muscles on both sides. Muscles is just a term we use, but there's a ton of research on the person that I forget his name, David, that wrote the book on emotional intelligence, actually just was on a TED Talk, The Armchair Expert, and he used this terminology. He said emotional intelligence builds like a muscle, right? And I've seen that professionally, but I think again the science really enforces it, and we talk about it a lot on the calls as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you have an example of someone who went through this exercise recently? Like, what did that look like for them?
So we do these weekly, but we really focus on, if we have to treat it like going to the gym. Right? Nobody expects to go to the gym, and I did one workout and I got 6-pack abs. Now we kind of do in this weird way, right? We have this, I went to work out today, I'm going to be right and project. But it's after about 2 or 3 weeks, you start seeing the first things you start seeing is people saying like, oh, wow, this is changing all of my conversations. Because just that pause to listen changes the reaction from the other person. And then having these questions, you find, reduces your anxiety in conversations. You have much more connection. And a couple of, I call them the success stories, is we have an individual on the call who's in the ag field. And I joke that he generally says about 10 words a day. And he's been on this call for an entire year. And he talks all the time. It's like, he says, I'm not the touchy-feely person, but I'm realizing how getting in there, being curious, asking these questions is getting so much more for his team, because he's executive director. We have a couple. We've actually have a few, husband and wife duos that come and talk about, how they use this with their kids, and there was a really good example like a week ago where, a father was watching his son play video games and getting really upset. And he just threw in this question of like, where have you been really good at this game? completely flip the switch, on the kid. And so at the end of the day, this is a sort of a new, we're building this thing as we go, where we're discovering it. And I had no intention of parents coming on to, do this with their kids. I come from the field of just working in business, and we're finding, the applications that people are using with this are pretty broad. We're coming out with mini workouts right now. We did one for Mother's Day where we have, it's a warm-up question, 3 workout questions, and what we call a cool-down question to have with your mother on Mother's Day. And some of the questions include, what's one of the more meaningful things you've done? Yeah. So giving your mother the time to be heard, right? To have her story heard. And so we're really just finding different ways to help communicate to people that, asking these questions is really about helping somebody else tell their story. We know the importance of telling our own story. But once you get in the art of helping somebody else, not just tell, but refine and curate their story to find the power in the story, that's when it becomes just exciting. That's maybe the only word I can use for it, because you see that change. And it's not a change you can get by telling people, I think.
Exactly. I love that. And so one thing I've discovered, and I think you're saying the same thing, Brian, is that people really want to be deeply understood. When somebody says to me, what do you do for a living? I say, I spend my days really trying to deeply understand the people I'm talking to. Mm-hmm. And that invites a question back, like, really? Who are you talking to? And what are you talking to them about? And I really want to deeply understand. So, but to your point, when we're trying to deeply understand, we may be asking questions, but typically then we're formulating our response. We're not really listening. So part of the gym experience is also teaching people how to just sit back and absorb and take in what they're hearing, I would imagine.
Yeah, we call it's a marching order almost, in terms of like authentic curiosity. We have to watch for when, I think it's over here. And like the inside or the idea you're gonna, like, I have an idea for somebody else. Once you feel that and it starts directing your questions, you feel it change. And while we have what we call the container question, so we stay within, right, a parameter, or rather what we call a container, so that we're staying in, the conversation has buffers, right? So we're staying in there, but within there, that's where we're being curious. And that's where it's, I use the cause map analogy in safety. When an accident happens, they research for years, turning over every assumption of why did this happen? We're just taking the same concept with success and the things that go well in your life. Is let's go and unturn every stone so we don't have any assumptions of how this happened and what you did to make this happen. But clearly and confidently that it was you doing this and you having these abilities that allowed this good thing to happen in your life. And we can only do that through authentic curiosity by, again, uncovering those stones and not thinking we know the answer before, the other person, finds it on their own.
Right. Which is also going against nature. Like, nature, again, like, I need to produce something back here, and I only can be paying attention right now to me and how I'm feeling. So I'm going to respond from that place. And a whole lot gets missed.
Yeah, and that's why the workout analogy works great, because going to the gym and lifting weights is against nature. Like, what 150 years ago, you're doing what? Like, we go out in the field. My dad used to joke about that when I was growing up. He was like, "Why are you going to the gym? I've got wood for you to cut over here, right?" And so we have sort of that same dynamic here of like, why would you go just ask questions to ask questions? But once you understand, like, for locus of control, it's the connection between the amygdala and the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. Or the stronger that connection, the better health outcomes, the better you feel, the lower risks of depression, these sorts of things. Medial prefrontal cortex, that's the gratitude piece. It becomes more sensitive with frequency of not just what you're grateful for, but where you felt grateful. Like that's how we change that question, is when's the last time you felt grateful? Is a whole different experience than what are you grateful for? Because it says, here's your part. And so we strengthen those, again, muscles where it seems counterintuitive, but boy, when people, I generally tell people, if you've been to the gym 3 times, you're hooked. We got you. Because we just, the people that come really consistently. And what we're trying to do now is actually provide more ways for people to practice it on their own before, they get to the gym, and building the curriculum behind what we've designed over the last year, which is a big hill to climb, but it's fun.
Well, but again, you're constantly evolving, and you're living what you're inviting people to do, right?
Yeah.
Which is being curious and being a student, which you seem to do very well. So, we've talked a bit about your TED Talk, and I was watching it with my 17-year-old because I think it was really good, and I wanted him to hear it. And he's thinking of becoming a social worker. Yay, carry on the family tradition of being a therapist. And he said, will you ask Brian how it felt for him to sit down with Nathan and to have that conversation? And I thought, oh, yeah. And so I want to ask that question on his behalf. And I was so excited that as he was watching, he was asking questions. He was thinking about what your experience was like in doing that, and what it was like to do that TED Talk. So, and I think about, as you're talking about the amygdala and the medial prefrontal cortex, in most humans, that's not fully baked until people are, 25, 27 years old.
Yeah.
And so you're working with parents on this as well. How are you finding, and is the research finding, that if we really train kids to do this, teach kids to do this, invite children, ask questions to help them get there, that is happening even more quickly in their lives, that they're getting that connection and that strengthening of those muscles?
Oh yeah, I think there's folks like Todd Kashkin, and then who does a lot of work on curiosity. I sort of stalk him on TikTok, but they show some of that reaction. I would say Carol Dweck's work indirectly talks about it, but because with growth mindset, like to get there, it changes the question that you're asking going in. So I think there's a lot of indirect stuff out there that shows that. With kids, it's the question that your son asked is it's a brilliant question, and in that time, but also on the TED Talk stage, it's the feeling is being comfortable in the unknown, and a rigid that very much feels like failure sometimes. And especially with those kids, some of the things that got me to ask questions was sort of releasing control, meaning I'd given up. The other way wasn't working, and I had to admit that. And so there was a vulnerability there. There was a fear there. And what I've learned is that, that's the place that you get to connect with the other person. That if you feel like you know all the time, then you have a status issue. Then you're not participating. You're just directing, right? You're not having a connection. You're just getting consistency, or you're just getting compliance, right? Versus when you participate, they have somebody on their side. And what we're looking for as human beings is to know we're not the only one with the problem we sit with, that there's other people working on this problem, and that I, as an individual, have the tools to overcome the problem. And if we think about those 3 things, then as a person asking the question, we understand that the answer that they're looking for is not in us. It's in them. And again, that allows us to be the student. The cool thing about that is the more you clarify that, because I get asked all the time, especially on the TED Talk, how can you be so vulnerable? And I said, it's not vulnerability when you're clear about what you're good at.
Exactly. Well said.
It's just permission for other people to be honest about what they are and are not good at.
Right. And if we can do it, people are, as you said, people are always, right? Our nervous system is always checking us out for safety or danger. And if we can do it, they can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So if someone wanted to learn more about you, about your work, about your company, where would they go? What would they do? How can they find you? How can they do this with you?
So go on to peoplestrength.com. We have a free community and then the paid gym community. We just started the free community a couple of weeks ago, but there's tons of resources. We're throwing a lot of stuff on there for people to practice, and then many things that they can try before they, maybe jump on the work. But peoplestrength.com, or if you want to find me, LinkedIn is probably the area I'm most active. Even though TikTok, it's kind of have some weird, not weird, they're great people.
They're great.
The TikTok platform, but I'm not sure I fully understand it yet. But I love the videos and I love the community there. So, but it's not super interactive. Whereas on LinkedIn, people reach out to me all the time, and it's a lot of fun. So either or, and we have free workouts every week. So if you join the free community, we have what's called the basic workout, which just shows you, okay, here's the structure, here's this question, feel this question versus this question. And we have people go onto that before they go into the actual, and we have at least one of those for free every week. Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. So I would highly encourage all of you to please go to peoplestrength.com, give it a try. This really can make a huge difference in your relationships. There's lots of science to back this up. And in addition to that, just lots of personal experience. Yes, when we can do that workout, when we can be really genuinely curious, ask good questions, pay attention, help people know that we really deeply want to understand them, that can really change the world. And not to be corny, but I really believe, as do you, that can change the world. So Brian Fretwell, thank you so much for joining us today. These half hours, they go by so quickly. I feel like I have so many more questions I want to ask you. So maybe I'll join a free gym workout and see what we can learn.
We would love to have you. That would be fantastic. And I really appreciate you taking the time to have me on and asking some fantastic questions. And the best of luck to your son going into the social work field. That's fantastic. We need more people in that line of work for sure.
We sure do. And people who can ask good questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, those who are joining us. And those of you who are watching afterwards, we're so glad you're here. We will see you next time on the Facebook Thrive Live Juniper Center. I am Dr. Margo Jacquot, owner and director of the Juniper Center. Brian Fretwell, thank you again. Be well, everyone.
Thank you.